A political reporter coming in from the SABC with over a decade of experience in terms of covering politics, both here at home and abroad, coming in from the dusty streets of Appelspoort in KwaZulu-Natal to the global stage. I'll tell you this, Mr. Samkelo has built a career rooted in truth, accountability, and storytelling. And together tonight, we're going to explore how politics shapes the graduate's journey and what opportunities exist in this evolving landscape. So definitely grab a pen and paper because this conversation is definitely for you. Mr. Samkelo, good evening and welcome to TUT FM.
A very good evening to you, sir, and to your listeners.
Sure, I'll tell you this. We tried by all necessary means to have you here, and now that you are here, let me fix that. Wait a bit. Wait, let me fix that for you. All right, sure, no problem. We're good to go. Do fix that. I want us to start it off here in terms of so that people could get a very clear sense of who they're talking to from those humble beginnings. What shaped your worldview and determination? I want to understand, how did your upbringing influence the path that you chose in terms of journalism and politics?
Well, everybody's upbringing plays a pivotal role in the career, in the path that they choose in life. Their socio-economic construct of where they come from, the socio-political events that take place of where they grew up, and ultimately those whom they grew up around, the ideological and intellectual prowess also has an influence on you as well. So I would say that my upbringing from a small rural town, village in a mountain area of Appelspoort, basically, it's the life story of many South Africans who come from deep rural parts of the country, who seek a better life in urban areas in their respective provinces, whether it be Popo, Northwest, Eastern Cape, Mpumalanga, or any other part of the country. The others who will come from Dantwanat, a deep rural part of Mpumalanga, like Thulasizwe Simelane, to become a household name within South Africa, SADC, the African diaspora, and the African continent at large, and the world. So we do all have similar stories of where we come from, because your upbringing ultimately shapes your ideological and intellectual prowess.
Sure, true, understandable, very clear there. And then with you having to build a career over a decade in terms of reporting both locally and globally, I think that kind of experience isn't just about, observing events. It is about interpreting them for ordinary South Africans. It makes me to ask this particular question to then say, how has that particular journey shaped your understanding of the role that young graduates can then play in our political space and future?
It's very difficult for a Black person in South Africa to make it in any aspect or in any career. If you see currently, you've got many people who've studied civil engineering who are sitting at home, who don't have access to any form of employment, because our education system is designed for us to be job seekers rather than job creators. And that feeds directly into the current socio-economic challenges facing many young people. For instance, if you go study medicine today, you are going to stand in long queues and lines and want employment. You're not going to have access to funding to form a hospital, to form a clinic of your own. If you look at the medical schemes that are there within the country, they are white dominated, they are white owned. You look at our economy, it's in the hands of a tiny clique of white Afrikaner men. And when you gain entry as a Black person into the job market, it becomes very difficult for you to compete with someone who's pale in color, who comes from a private school or a multiracial school, who has a trust fund at home, and who's able to have their parents get them a flat, get them a car, and have easy access to their internship. But when you are Joe, coming from deep rural Donald and Mpumalanga, you are going to have to look for a back room in Tembisa or Soweto or Ivory Park, or in some instances have to travel as far flung as coming from Orange Farm and traveling either to Auckland Park or traveling to Hyde Park or traveling to Randburg or any other media house that is there within the country. So you as a Black person in South Africa have to work 10 times as harder as someone who is pale in color. And that just tells you that the economic construct of South Africa is already a huge disadvantage for you as a black person coming from a rural village, seeking a better life in the city.
Sure. True, understandable. And you know what? With those sentiments, before I leap over and talk about the graduates and the politics and even the challenges, like we've mentioned after the gown and the cap, I just want to ask you, what are some of the key lessons that you have learned that you feel graduates can carry as they step beyond the graduation platform?
The education system will only teach you 20% of what you need to know in life. The education system will only teach you 20% of what you need to know in life. 80% of what you are going to apply in life, you will learn it along your trade. You will learn it along your journey in life. So the education system only contributes 20% towards your life. The rest of the 80% is up to you to learn from other people, from other people's experiences, from people in and around you. And the education system won't teach you that. The education system is designed for us to be job seekers. And when it's designed for us to be job seekers, we're not innovative in what we want to do. And that is why we need a complete overhaul of the education system from entry level, from preschool, going right up until matric. Because the education system is not currently responding to the socio-economic needs of our country. We need boilermakers, we need artisans in this country, but we don't have the currently because all of us are rushing to go to your Vets University, TUT, UJ, UP, Stellenbosch, UCT. We're all rushing to learn theory as opposed to the practical job at hand that needs to be done.
Sure.
And that is where we are being beaten by other countries. For instance, if you look in the artisan space in South Africa currently, most of the people who are building our homes, who are in the construction sector, who are in the electrical space, we've got a vast contingent of Zimbabwean nationals working within that space within the country, and even in the nursing fraternity now. We've got a lot of our brothers and sisters from next door in Zimbabwe who are working within our country because we are going for your humanities studies. We are going to do human resources as opposed to the technical skills that are needed by the country. And if it's not the technical skills, it is skills within your medicine spaces. We're not there in our vast majority as South Africans. And our government is simply not creating the policies and the avenues for us to go within that route. For instance, if you look at the global stats, South Africa is amongst one of the worst performing literacy rates of the country, of the world rather. And that just tells you of the systemic problems that are there within the education sector within our country. And most of us are to blame because we don't read as South Africans, unfortunately. And it's a very sad state of affairs, which ultimately also showcases itself when graduates leave the university space and go into the job market, because the university space is no longer teaching them the skills that are needed for the job market. They struggle when they get their first forms of internships or jobs to perform to their maximum capabilities, because what they're learning at school or at university is not what they're applying in the workplace.
Sure, true. And then with that being said, given the fact that we have this vibrant democracy, but we find you find young people's voices struggling to being heard within those spaces, do you then think graduates don't have enough platforms to then, influence political discourse and even policy?
South Africans have been depoliticized from all walks of life. Very few young people are involved in politics. At university level, they just get excited by seeing Julius Malema coming to address the AFF Youth Command rally, or one of the ANC leaders going to address a SASCO, YCL, or ANC Youth League rally. I've not seen MK, they send your Bonkos Kanyiles, so on and so forth, who are part of this Fees Must Fall movement in student politics. But other than that, many South Africans have been depoliticized, because even when these leaders go to universities to speak about politics, they go there and they speak about things that are happening in parliament and not issues that are directly affecting students in a university life. For a student who does not have access to national student aid, to the national student financial aid scheme, a student who's been blocked by the institutions because they are owing millions and millions of or thousands of rands of tuition, accommodation, fees, and that they are just blocked from the system from attaining it because of their deplorable social, economic, and financial conditions that they have back home.
Yeah.
So the young people have been depoliticized. There is no form of political education that takes place everywhere across the country. Many of them are even confused when it comes to the political space because they just perceive politicians as amassing wealth for themselves. And this is not just a phenomenon that is synonymous with the ANC, but it's a phenomenon that has become synonymous with all political formations within the country. When you look at the lavish lifestyles the so-called leaders of society are living.
Sure. You know what? It then brings us to the heart of our conversations, the challenges beyond the cap and the gown, and I'll take some of them before coming in for the opportunities that are there. I think the transitions coming in from campus to career is definitely tough for many, and politics often complicates that particular journey. But coming in with you, with the experience that you have, what are some of the biggest challenges you think graduates face when they then enter spaces that are then influenced by governance and even policy?
It's segregation, first and foremost. There's a lot of red tape and segregation of young people when they enter the workplace because, as you know, there's only one thing that's permanent in life. It's change. Change is the only permanent thing that we have in life. Whether we like it or not, change will take its course, whether we are ready, prepared, or not prepared for it. And many in the past 2 decades have not been anticipating the change that has taken place in the job market and the new innovation that is coming with a new younger breed of people who are entering the workplace in all sectors of society and in all forms of professions. So that sort of segregation of young people and the gatekeeping that takes place, because if Samkelo enters a workplace, someone will feel threatened that this young man is coming here to take my job, and he's got access to all and sundry of these particular individuals, which I may not have access to those particular individuals or that particular information, and to then ultimately become a target of your superiors within the workplace. And that is what's blocking many young people, and also the racialization of the South African economy. If Matthew and Silindile enter the workplace together, Silindile being black would have to work 10 times as harder than Matthew, because Matthew is of a significant skin color. He will get preferential treatment because of South Africa's structural problems that are there and South Africa's economic and socio-political background that took place, and also how the economy has not changed and is not yet inclusive of everyone.
And you know what, Mr. Maseko, some may argue that this isn't just about politics, but about political willpower, if possible. But from your reporting, how much of this crisis is tied to the decisions of those in power?
Political decisions are taken by the powerful economic class.
Mm-hmm.
Political decisions are determined by the dominant economic class. Political decisions are taken by the dominant political class.
Sure.
That's just the nature of life. That's how it is, and you won't change it now.
Yeah, true. And all of this then brings in the brain drain being real with graduates immigrating for better opportunities abroad. And then do you think South Africa risk losing its, should I say, brightest talent because of the current political and even economic frustrations?
Sorry. Look, the issue of migration is a global phenomenon. Everyone around the world is moving, migrating somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not an issue that is unique to South Africa. You go to the United States of America, you find a number of citizens of the USA going to look for greener pastures within Asia, within China, and those countries within that particular side. You go to the UK right now, Europe, there is a lot of problems, particularly of inflation and the high cost of living that is taking place across and sweeping across Europe. You find a lot of residents from Europe are moving down under to your Australia, to your New Zealand, to your South Africa, and looking for new economic opportunities. As you would find young Black South Africans now moving abroad to Asia to teach English in China, in Japan, and in Korea.
Yeah.
South Korea, and it's a global phenomenon. Everyone is on the move globally, looking and seeking for a better life, and it's only going to get worse as the years gone by, because all of the rest of the world is developed. It's only Africa that is not yet fully developed, and with the current geopolitical tectonic plates shifting, there's a scramble for the ownership of the African economy. And who will own that African economy?
If not us.
By the looks of things, it will be foreign nationals who will own it. It will be those who are coming to invest their monies who will own the African economy. And we will forever be perpetual slaves to those who've got economic power.
You know what? I want to bring in the issue of pathways and even opportunities that are there for young people, but with corruption scandals and governance failures, they have left many disillusioned. I mean, some graduates even disengage entirely from politics. But coming in from you, from your own perspective, how can then they remain hopeful and even engaged despite these frustrations?
Politics determines the price of bread, unfortunately. And if you disengage from politics, you're disengaging from your own future. You don't have to be integrally involved in the political machinations of political formations, but on important political days, such as voting day, you need to stand up and go and vote. And your vote is ultimately your voice that will choose and craft a path for your nation to go forward. It may be right, it may be wrong. And in many instances, if you look at South Africa's voters' roll, there are a lot of young people who register to vote, but they don't turn out on voting day because of the disillusionment with politics. That I will go and vote. Samkelo will go to parliament. He'll be a minister, a deputy minister. He will get an economic upward mobility in life, and that will add no material change or benefit to my life as a voter. I will still go back to Tembisa, to Ivory Park, to sewage running down the streets, to roads infested with potholes as big as swimming pools for frogs. And democracy doesn't work for me. But for someone in the suburbs, their grass is cut, they've got electricity, their refuse is collected, they are just affected by water cuts and power cuts for those 2-3 hours. But me in the township and in the rural areas, I'm faced with load reduction for 6 hours. So the life for an African Black child is 20 times as harder as opposed to someone who is sitting in a lavish suburb.
Very sad. Very sad. Ladies and gentlemen, 30 minutes before the hour 9 o'clock, and soon after that, Sir Harris will come in and give you the date night show. But in conversation with us, Mr. Samkelo Maseko coming in from the SABC, who's a political reporter, and we're speaking graduates and even the political landscape. We're exploring the challenges and opportunities that are there beyond the cap and the gown. And for so far, we have touched on the challenges with segregation being the hardest of them all. But I want to bring in Mr. Samkelo to then navigate the opportunities and pathways that are there. Mr. Samkelo, let me then say this like this. Despite these challenges that we have spoken about, I tend to think South Africa, remains a land of potential. Political openings, entrepreneurship, and social innovation are on the rise. Your perspective, what opportunities exist that graduates today that are there, but perhaps they are not being seen clearly?
As I said earlier, South Africans, there are many opportunities. But the problem is access to funding for many young South Africans. To start a business is not easy. It needs a lot of financial backing, determination, hard work, perseverance. And you will fall 10 times before you can make it on the 11th time. And unfortunately, we as Black South Africans don't have that latitude as opposed to our white counterparts who may have the access to funding because of riches at home, generational wealth, that we are still trying to build as a Black society. If you look at the history of how the Broederbond was formed by the Nationalist Party, it just speaks of how there was a directed and concentrated effort by the administration of the apartheid era to build an economic class of the Afrikaner Broederbond, which we today bemoan when it comes to broad-based Black economic empowerment and affirmative action. We call it taboo, we call it cadre deployment. And everywhere across the world, every administration deploys its own people to implement its policies. The Nationalist Party deployed its own in order to build the economic power base of the Broederbond.
And you know,
but when it comes to us, Blacks and Africans in particular, it becomes problematic.
And I wanted to take you on the issue of policy, because now policy often feels like something that is reserved for, certain people, for experts, and yet directly it shapes the lives of young people. I wanted to ask you, when you then mentioned those pointers, to then say, how can graduates then find the avenues to participate in terms of shaping or even influencing policy?
We need to pay close attention to what happens in Parliament. Many young people don't know or don't pay attention to the various bills that are being discussed in Parliament when it goes to public hearings. When the NHI bill, for example, was being debated on public hearings across the country, we never saw young people sending in their comments or going to comment and give their insights at these public hearings, because ultimately that NHI is going to affect you and I. There was no young people when it came to the issue of the land expropriation with no compensation bill that was talked about. Young people shied away. And you look at how we used to be sustained as Black South Africans in rural parts of the country by sustenance farming, by our grandparents, by our parents. That was ultimately what fed us, what bought us clothes to go to school, and had our relative upward mobility as Blacks. But those sectors were all done away with. You go to Parliament, very few young people will actually tell you what are the current bills that are being debated in Parliament. For instance, there's the SABC funding bill that is being debated. How many young people actually know about it? Very few.
Very few.
Very few have even commented on it. And that's the systemic depoliticization of South Africans and the youth that has taken place, because we now perceive politics to be Julius Malema on a podium, speaking, saying whatever is at the top of his mind, or Musi Maimane, or Cyril Ramaphosa is the president responding to opposition leaders in Parliament. And that's become our politics. It's no longer about substantive issues that are currently being discussed, policy formulation that will ultimately take the country forward and change the life of you and I.
And with that being said, let's remove politics from Parliament, because politics is not only about Parliament, but I think it starts at the community level. I think we should start there. How do we get graduates to engage more meaningfully in local governance structures than making their way up?
At a local level, it's very difficult because local politics are very toxic. Local government politics are very toxic. Looking at what is happening in political parties across the board, it's a very toxic environment, but it is the cold face of service delivery. It is the cold face of the immediate changing of someone else's life in communities. And if we disengage in local politics, we will be faced with the problems we are facing today of sewage running down the streets, of roads infested with potholes as big as being swimming pools for frogs. It will ultimately see us faced with long, protracted hours of load reduction in townships. Recently, in an area in Abakulusi, in KwaZulu-Natal, in Vryheid, Demondlo, there were violent protests because of the long, protracted load reduction hours in that particular area of the country. Go to Soweto today. If you drive or in a taxi to Soweto at night, it's like you're driving through a dark city, a torn city, where you could easily be mugged. You go to areas in the country, you can't even drive in those roads. There's no water. And that speaks to that lack, that speaks to the depoliticization and lack of activism from citizens in communities.
And I will come in with the issue of activism there in just a bit, but I'm taking you on a note when you say local politics can be toxic. That brings in the issue of civil societies and NGOs that are there that often bridge, the gap between politics and these grassroots realities. But also within that, we can then think of opportunities that might be there. With your own understanding of coming in from experience, what opportunities exist for graduates in those spaces to then drive real change?
The NGO sector, I'm not that versed about the NGO sector within our country. Let me be quite honest with that. In that particular sector, I come from a rural area of Appelspoch. I know no NGO that operates in my area, none whatsoever. I know political parties that are relatively active in the community, but when it comes to your NGOs, I know at some point there was something called Masbambisane or something like that, which spoke about cooperatives, particularly within the farming, agro-processing space. But those were all, there was no produce that ever came out of them. There's nothing that ever took place. So NGOs are more active in your suburban areas because there's easy access to funding there.
Yeah.
But in your rural parts, in your townships, you do find them, especially in your areas. I know there was one in Randfontein about 5-6 years ago when violent protests of looting erupted in Randfontein. Though there was 3 young chaps or 2 who had formed a library, and it was a basement library of where they had been operating from. And they did everything to protect that particular library in that Randfontein area of Johannesburg in Western area. If I remember correctly, the time the EFF in the provincial legislature of Gauteng was led by Christina Mabala, and there was an area where Christina Mabala, the likes of Itani Mukwebo of the EFF, they came from that particular area of Randfontein. In Western area at the time. I was still starting off as a journalist. I remember it was around 2014, it was around 2015, 2016.
Yeah.
That particular time. That's the one of the few NGOs I remember, or young activists, that were taking their work of community development and very serious.
Yeah, and when you mention those years, it's in those years of the hashtag Fees Must Fall, and I want to bring in that point you mentioned about activism, that it has been a way for graduates to then push, boundaries from the liberation era coming also to the Fees Must Fall. How can that particular issue of activism then, be transformed into a professional and even leadership opportunities?
Let me be controversial. What is so glorious about those who are supposedly part of the Fees Must Fall generation? What's different about them?
Yeah.
As opposed to those who first started protesting for free, decolonized higher education in your predominantly disadvantaged institutions, such as the protest capital University of South Africa, Tshwane University of Technology, Port Hay, where it is the political Brains Trust of South Africa, University of Fort Hare, Walter Sisulu University, Mangosuthu University of Technology, Durban University of Technology. The struggle for free quality higher education doesn't begin with the so-called fees must fall generation. It only became predominantly covered by media houses once your traditional white universities started protesting. Your WITS, your UCT, your Stellenbosch, your UP. Once those institutions started protesting, and due to the close proximity to media houses of WITS University, there was a spotlight on this particular young black generation that has swelled the ranks of the higher institutions of your predominantly white prestigious universities. But those whom over the years were your technicons, University of Technicons, your UJs, your DUT, your TUT, your VAL, they've been protesting for years, fighting for students to get access to higher education, for NASFAS, fighting for students not to be blacklisted or blocked from higher education just because they are owing. But once your predominantly white institutions, whom were children of the black struggling middle class, started protesting and disadvantaging the white students who had the access and means to pay for their education, it then got the glare of the media space. So I don't like this particular focus of this so-called fees must fall generation. Yet we forget the likes of Spiwe Zuma, the former late president of SASCO, who were pioneering this particular struggle of free education back in the early 90s. So we need to be politically educated and conscientized on the history of student protest.
And with that being said, I'm taking you on the issue of, then I would then say a political journalism. The work that you do, it's a very powerful tool itself, exposing the truths, amplifying voices, and even shaping narratives. Where you sit there, do you then see it, or do you think this political journalism is a very viable and meaningful career path for graduates who are then seeking to influence a change?
You can influence change wherever you are. It's all about passion, it's all about drive. Political journalism is about drive, it's about passion, it's about love for politics, it's about love for policy, it's about love for human change. And if you are and have that passion and have that zeal and tenacity, then you can make it. But it's not easy, like in any other field. There are huge sacrifices that you need to make. Times where you don't sleep, where you have to travel a lot, and sometimes even at your own expense, not at your employer's expense, because, you are trying to build that particular network and profile for yourself. And then ultimately will come the change that you want to see in the world or in your community. But it's not an overnight success. It's a long, painful journey. That is not easy at all.
You know what?
But it's a worthwhile journey.
I want to bring in the role of media and storytelling, and I'm thinking about it now when you mentioned that, the fees must fall movement only become glorified when this particular institution, not even particular institution, but the media really gained much traction on it because the struggle had been there long before. But before I get into that, let's look into the fact that even though that politics set the framework, the private sector is also the biggest employer. I want to ask you, how can graduates find opportunities within the intersection of private sector innovation and the political influence?
It's going to be very difficult because the private sector plays a very critical and important role in society. It's a pivotal strata of society. Because government creates a conducive environment for job creation by the private sector. People must not mislead young people and say, no, we will create 4,000 jobs. No, government doesn't create jobs. Government's role is to create a conducive environment for job creation. When it comes to state-owned enterprises, SOEs or SOCs, state-owned companies, they are meant to play a developmental role. And that developmental role means they also create employment opportunities, either directly or indirectly. So no nation building can ever take place solely by government alone. It needs a patriotic private sector. Note, it needs a patriotic private sector that is going to be able to invest money, open their balance sheets, but also for them to do that, they need a conducive environment to be created where municipalities are able to provide basic services such as water, street lights, traffic lights, electricity, refuse collection, do its vegetation, and have an aesthetically sound environment to operate in. So it's a situation of where you scratch my back, I scratch yours, unfortunately.
Let me then bring in, because I see with your pointers there, it goes into the line of questioning that I want to take when it comes to the role of media and even storytelling, because media is often seen or through the lens which graduates underestimate politics, but the narratives that are there shape and influence perceptions of power and accountability. I want to understand, with your own perception, how do you think the media stories rather affect how graduates then see the political landscape, and especially with the pointers that you just mentioned now?
Politics is perception. Media will tell you only 50-60% of the actual truth. The rest is up to you to deduce for yourself and to find out, because there's only limited time to do a story or to write an article. We can only have so many words. There are many other stories that need to be covered. So politics is perception, media creates, and there is something called the agenda setting theory. The media sets the agenda, the tone of the country. And he who sets the agenda is he who holds the economic base. And the economic base is with who? A particular tiny sector of society. That is the sector that ultimately sets the agenda, because it is the one that ultimately owns the media house.
And you know what? Very pregnant pointers there, I'll tell you that. Very pregnant points. But also, let's bring in at this point where the graduate stories are then, painted in bold and broad strokes. One would then say unemployed, disillusioned, or coming in to be activists. But everyone has their own story. With those pointers that you mentioned, that you are being given 60 to 55% of what you should know, do you believe that young people should be more intentional in terms of then shaping their own narratives and even telling their own narratives?
Young people should be more intentional about shaping their futures, because there's no one else who's going to determine and to shape your future for you besides yourself. I can't come and force you to study, to read, to go to school, to take yourself seriously. I can, as government, create a conducive environment for you to do that. Or your parents can create a conducive environment for you to do that. But ultimately, angeke uyithathe inkomo uyiphuzise amanzi. Angeke uyithathe inkomo uyiphuzise amanzi. Ungayithatha inkomo uyiluse uyise emfuleni. Kodwa ukuthi iyaphuza noma ayiphuzi, sekubese kuyiyona inkomo.
Sure. And because we're about to run flat out of time, I would tend to think that with your experience over a decade and locally and internationally, so you've then seen how public pressure, which is then amplified by media and youth voices, can then shift to political outcomes. We've seen coming in from last week in a part, How can then journalism highlight these struggles that graduates are going through in ways that can actually influence policy making if we're all gonna then say everything boils down to policy?
It's activism journalism. That every journalist is an activist in my view, whether directly or indirectly. And if you go back to that activism of society, then you can rebuild and you can put the struggles of young graduates into the forefront of the country's most priority areas, because currently we're just the statistics. Youth unemployment is just a statistic in this country. Until you put a face to it, it's just a number.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Okay. So
if you look at the Arab Spring as an example, the Arab Spring, it was young people who came together and said enough is enough. And they changed governments. You go to Zambia. In Zambia, they've changed political parties 4 times. Hichilema, who's currently the president, at some point was the 3rd biggest political party in Zambia. If you look at the party of KUNIP, of the founding president of Zambia, Dr. K.K. Kaunda, they've been wiped out to smithereens. You can't even see a remnant of UNIP anymore. And Dr. K.K. Kaunda's UNIP was one of the allies of South Africa and the African National Congress when it was still fighting for the liberation of South Africa. So we've got countries that are able to say thank you very much to liberation movements. You've brought us here. But unfortunately, you are not taking us to the new promised land of economic freedom. The same happened just next door with BDP in Botswana, where President Masisi's party was butchered to smithereens by the electorate. You go to Chama Pendudze, they've also been faced with the same problems. You go to Tanzania. SADC liberation movements are going through that particular phase now that was done in countries such as Zambia with UNIP of Dr. K.K. Kaunda. And once liberation movements lose power, it's only rare that they're able to claw back that political power. BDP in Botswana is faced with the same problem. The same could happen to the ANC in South Africa. So we are going through a new phase of change in the African continent. But the question is, are these new leaders taking over from these liberation movements?
It is definitely, let me do this, definitely 5 minutes before the hour 9 o'clock, and soon after that, Harris will come in and take over this hot seat. But in conversation with us in Plago graduate, Mr. Samkelo Maseko, coming in from the SABC, who's a political reporter, and we were speaking graduates in the political landscape, and we were then exploring the opportunities and challenges beyond the cap and the gown. But Mr. Maseko, we have to be hopeful. We have to look into the future. Within this few minutes, let me take you on this. South Africa is at a crossroads, which is then facing both crisis and possibility. I mean, graduates are standing at the same crossroads as the next generation of leaders. But with you, what role do you then see them playing in terms of transforming our democracy and economy, let's say for over the next decade?
Young people must financially educate themselves. The system won't teach you financial literacy. The new workplace will need you to have an edge. Will need you to have something unique about you. Something that you as Sipho, you as Amanda, you as Mbali will have that nobody else has. And if there's that nothing that is distinctive and that separates you from the rest, what's the point of employing you?
And you know what? I'll tell you this. As a graduate myself, there's many of us who are listening tonight who are both, carrying both hope and even uncertainty about the future, given the fact that you see the Madlanga Commission, there's a lot of issues coming in with the country. 2026 local elections are coming in the next couple of years, elections. If you are then to leave graduates with one powerful message in terms of navigating unemployment, politics, and even opportunities within this country, what would it be?
there must be something distinctive about you.
Mm-hmm.
There must be something unique about you. There must be something that you offer that nobody else offers.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, the workplace does not need deadwood. It needs pioneers. It needs innovators.
Mm-hmm.
What are you coming with that nobody else is coming with?
Sure. You know what, Mr. Maseko, I'm about to let you go in this particular moment of time, but don't go as yet. We need to then, you know what, I think I have a minute before I let you go. Let's play a very rapid fire game so that, you know, we shake it off. You don't go to sleep with all of this heavy issues in your mind. Just relax, right? I'm going to ask you, you'll choose a couple of questions, so you choose, right? You don't have to think much about it. Don't have to put in your political, research into it. No, just simple stuff there. You ready?
I'm ready.
Sure, let's go. Graduation gown or office suit?
Graduation gown.
Books or podcasts?
Books.
Internship stipend or exposure?
Exposure.
Political rally or a musical festival?
Both.
Coffee or energy drink?
Coffee.
Parliament or newsroom?
Newsroom.
A startup hustle or corporate ladder?
Can you please repeat?
Startup hustle or corporate ladder?
Startup hustle.
Debating politics or debating sports?
Politics.
Late night study grind or early morning prep?
Early morning prep.
Working abroad or building right here at home?
There's no better place than home.
All right, that closes up our conversation. I want to thank you so much for making time to speak with me this evening, and I hope this is not the end of our conversation. We'll continue conversing more in the future. Thank you so much and have yourself a lovely evening.
Thank you very much.
All right. Definitely brings us to the end of our conversation, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to take this moment to acknowledge the following people, and after that, Say Harris will come in and give you the Day Night Show. He's a bold man, definitely a bold voice. Ladies and gentlemen, I take this moment to acknowledge Dr. Roland Brink, and I take this moment to acknowledge Mekidiboni Mahapa Tselela, who's our station manager. A very big shout out to Mepo Shashalate Tavana. Very big shout out to Angela Makwela. Without her, this show would never be possible. And a very big shout out, if I could, I would give him a standing ovation, Mr. Liseja Senosha. Without that gentleman, I don't know. Even Sir Harris knows that without him, there could never be Plug Graduate. Ladies and gentlemen, I close it off here. My name is Polelo N. Madisa. I am second of my name, first of my line. I'm Refilus fan as the best client could offer. I am the Pitorian Prince, well known as the big nose boy in the redhead. Yentone Pitori Twane Ratwana Ramela Polo Kamanala Jama Kunyaka Achaka Filar Mapanzola. Wana man, in everything that you do, Ungarabalo Itzakisa. In everything that you do, Ungarabalo Kongela. Good evening.